Hello, everyone. Welcome to CDO Expo Virtual. We're here to kick off the virtual experience with the first Tech Talk session, The Power of Light. A special thank you to Savant for sponsoring this Tech Talk. I'm your session moderator, Tom Doherty. Today, we are exploring the future of connected lighting and design, where we will discuss how to create functional spaces with dedicated lighting and shading techniques, outdoor applications, and biophilic principles. So I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have Paul Williams, General Manager of Product Management and Growth, GE Lighting, a Savant company. Paul, say hello.
Hey, hello. Thank you. Pleasure to be in front of everybody today.
And Sean Weiner, General Manager at Bravas, Baltimore. Say hi, Sean.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
And finally, David Warfel, Chief Evangelist of Light from Light Can Help You.
Hey, Tom. Hi, everybody.
At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat function and a Q&A function. Please make sure to put any and all questions into the Q&A function during this panel, and we will do our best to answer those at the end of the session. So let's get started. Paul, what is the best way to communicate the benefits of circadian lighting to customers?
So the way that I like to explain it, and as we tell our integrators and dealers to communicate to customers, it's around the health benefits of circadian rhythm. And I start off first by telling them a little bit about the problem that they may not even know has happened to them or what's been affecting them. And that is, in today's modern world with lots of artificial light around them that's being generated right from the light bulbs to the fixtures, even to the mobile devices that we're using or at the computer screen I'm looking at right now, are all falsely sending light to me that's not natural. It's not natural light. And the human physiology for lots and lots of time had evolved around the cycle of the sun. And our bodies and our physiology became attuned to that cycle of the sun. It's what then dictated when we would sleep to make us sleepy and when we would wake up and when we'd be alert. It was all based on cycles of the sun. And it's only been in the last 140 years, really, that our lives haven't been dictated by the sun cycle when we were able to have artificial light be influenced in that. I mean, even candlelight and firelight really mimic a lot of the spectrum of light that you would see in the end of the day anyway. So even those make you sleepy. And a lot of research has been done. We can talk about is around what type of light and wavelengths of light and brightness of light really affect the production of melatonin. Melatonin is that chemical in your body that is generated that helps you feel naturally sleepy and helps you get a more impactful sleep cycle, which then in turn makes you more alert during the day. But then the color of light can also be the thing that stops melatonin from being produced so that then you are alert. And the problem that we have today is that honestly, in today's world with all these connected devices around it, we're actually not producing enough melatonin. And so that's why you see a lot of people really suffering from sleep deprivation, not getting enough sleep, not being as alert during the day because they're also not getting the right types of light. And so the way I explain it to customers is like, we can actually change that. The technology's there with the lighting systems that we can install today that actually mimic what the sun was doing and that circadian cycle to make that be more attuned with the way our bodies were created and the way that our body physiology works, to be able to create that sleep cycle, to also, though, be able to make us more alert during the times of day that we need to be alert. And I find that people understand that. It seems to make good sense. People get the fact that, it's only been this last 140 years that we've lived under artificial light. We were dictated by the sun. We spent a lot of time outdoors, and that has changed.
Well, pardon the pun here, but for the doubting Thomases that are out there, what can be backed up with scientific study? What are some of these sources? What can you point to?
You bet. There's a couple of really good sources. The good news is certainly, and I would say that there was a heavy amount of skepticism if I go back 5-6 years ago, and like this seemed like pseudoscience. It was like, sure, that seems like that's a great thing. But there's a lot of clinical study that's been done, especially by institutes such as Lighting Research Center. If I think about the Center for Chronobiology out of Switzerland, the Lighting Research Center is out of Connecticut, and the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience out of Austria. They've done a lot of really good studies where they've taken people and they put it into control groups and test groups. They put them into circumstances where they're living around the light cycle that was generated, around natural light, and around completely devoid of natural light. And a lot of these tests have shown that there is a correlation, absolute correlation between what is happening in the sun, or I was saying light, and the wavelength of light that's being presented to a human, along with the exposure to light. And the exposure to natural light will also have an effect on folks as well. And so there's a lot of study. People want to look out there. You can find a plethora of it, but certainly, I would say that science has started to recognize the fact that it's not just a pseudoscience, that there's actual real science around this ability.
Great. David, I know that you and your firm, help people implement these sort of solutions in your design. So, what sources do you trust for information on connected circadian, biophilic, and light for wellness?
That's a good question, Tom. And I think I echo some of Paul's, although some of those I hadn't heard of, so I'm going to have to look those up afterwards. But the LRC, the Lighting Research Center from Rensselaer, is one of my favorites. We can get some information from Pacific Northwest labs, national labs. And I end up reading the abstracts from different medical journals, and it's all things that I find online, but I can't understand the deep science of the actual article, but there's usually an abstract or a 3 or 4 page summary of what the research study has done. Mm-hmm. And from that, I'm able to glean facts without much interpretation, without too much interpretation, so that then I can synthesize that and try to present a more, a balanced reaction or a balanced observation for the clients.
Great. So I want to turn to Sean. There's many people that are watching this presentation, but I would think, the majority of them are integrators. And, I was an integrator in my past life. I kind of still am. But we've all mastered the art of designing, installing, and programming lighting control systems. Now that we've added color-changing fixtures to our installations, how do we create, define, and most importantly, limit the scope of our programming? And how do we estimate the time and cost required to provide installation, programming, commissioning services? What's your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Tom. That's a really, really loaded question.
It is, and it's a long one.
It is. But there should be a relatively simple answer to it, although it's going to be complex on the integrated part. So as long as we've been programming and installing lighting control systems, we've always had to define and limit a scope for the customer. And that can be something as simple as building a template for the way we program systems and allowing some customization and flexibility for the last, let's say, 10% of that installation. I think that case is still true. The difference is that now we've added literally billions of colors to the mix, which gives us billions of opportunities to program and change things. So our recommendation and the way we handle it here is to build some templated scenes and some templated applications. So for example, we might create a color scene that we call Energize, which is going to be a higher color temperature situation for the work hours of the day. Maybe a relaxed scene that simulates the candlelight that Paul had mentioned earlier at the end of the day to start that melatonin production. Some scenes that are fun, some colorful scenes. And then, of course, the natural scene, which is going to mimic and replicate the color temperature of the sun at that point of the day. If we build 4 or 5 scenes like that, and we can get some help from manufacturers of these products, we can get some help from our own engineers to build and design those scenes, we can actually reuse those or recycle those on all of our projects to get a better handle on what the cost and the time element is related to building those scenes. Again, it's going to be a best practices event. It's going to be some trial and error on your part. But it's important that we define that in our proposals and in our contract documents so that the client understands exactly what their expectations should be. So the end result is giving them exactly what they're looking for and what they're expecting to see.
Yeah. So, as we're talking about this, we're talking about emulating, natural light, right? And so, following that on and the integration solutions that, our members provide, how do motorized window treatments play in the lighting control conversation, and why are they even more important with these new lighting fixtures? What would you say to that?
we should probably stop talking about lighting control and start talking more about light control, because we're controlling the artificial light in the home as well as the natural light outside the home. That's even more important now. So if we have the ability to automate or at least integrate natural light with the color temperature of the lighting in the home, we can extend that light from outside the space all the way into that space, and provide a really unique experience to a customer that wouldn't have had that before. In the old days, you open your shades, natural light comes in, and the colors are different. So it essentially washes out or reduces the impact of the lighting design inside the home. We can use some of that to our advantage now and augment and supplement that. And I think the inverse is true too. You can actually lower shades at nighttime. So let's say it's February, it gets dark at 5 p.m. and the kids still have homework to do. Lower the shades to darken the space, that take that dusk light out, that yellow, reddish orange light out, and bring in some energizing blue light in the spectrum to keep everyone awake and alert so we can finish up the homework.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, you know, as we're talking about this whole area here, it came to my mind here, David, you know, why do you believe that integrators should pay special attention to this field? You're not an integrator, you're a lighting designer. Why do you think, as a lighting designer, that integrators should be paying attention to this segment?
That's a good question. And, you know, my first response, Tom, was, you know, please pay attention to it because the designers need the help, right? But I would say there's two reasons, really. One is the profit reason that I think is more apparent. If you start selling light fixtures, if you start selling lighting control systems with this built into it, there's potential for profit. The fixtures are expensive, or some of them can be, so you can start to raise your profitability on a single project, and that's huge for integrators. But for me as a designer, the reason that I'm passionate about integrators getting into this space is that they can. And by that I mean that these technologies and this science, I was looking through some of the studies, and you know, we're talking 2004, you know, we're talking 2010, so not yesterday when we were able to justify this, and not yesterday when tunable white and all of these technologies came out. They've been out for a good stretch of time. They're essentially tested and proven technologies, but at home and in most small businesses, nobody's using them. And why? If those technologies are out there and nobody's using them and they can help us live better lives, why? And for me, it comes down to control. Nobody knows how to make it work. But an integrator is in the right place at the right time to fill that gap, and nobody else has their skill set. So, you know, traditional lighting distributors, traditional lighting warehouses, you know, big box retailers, if it comes in a box and it has a pretty smiley sun on it, they can sell it, but they don't know anything else about it, right? So I think it's the integrator's opportunity to actually help everybody live better lives because they know how to control things. And I would say, you know, for me, that's why I'm really excited about integrators moving into this channel, because the technology has been sitting on the shelf for a decade, basically.
Paul, Sean, do you have any comments to add to that, or?
Yeah, I'll echo David. I believe the integrator is definitely in a really good spot to be able to take advantage of that. And if you look at the work that some of the companies are doing, I'll take ours, for example, Savant. We have this daylight mode. So understanding that if you said to a consumer, what is the Kelvin that you should be at during noontime? I don't even know. Nobody knows. And that is what I think David was referring to, is that it's hard for you to take some stuff off the shelf as a consumer, put it in the house and get the benefit out of it that you would need to get. And that's where companies like Savant, where we've got a daylight mode that actually does that for you. You can tweak it, but we'll come up with a profile that's based on the best science that's out there on what that should look like. And you can even demonstrate it to a consumer in a 1 minute period of time. I can show you what a daytime cycle looks like. And you go, oh, I get this, light is shifting. But that's where the integrator is going to add so much value to that consumer coming in, not only telling the story that we were telling in the beginning, is like, how do you sell it to them? But not that I can deliver it to you, and in a way that you don't have to think about. And you know, one of the things that Sean was talking about was this presets. If I wanted to set that preset to keep everybody alert because there's homework that needs to be done, I can do that. And that's something that only an integrator is going to be able to unlock for that consumer today.
Great. I want to stay with you for a second here, you know, to kind of expand this out, to something that is, we're occurring today here in 2020. I don't even need to say the word. We know what it is, but I guess I will say the word. What do you believe, Paul, to be the best way to create flexible lighting options to spaces that are, in light of COVID-19, and more people working from home, being used for multiple purposes, not just better sleep and better energy, but these homes now are education places. I'm working. We're all working from home right now. The entertainment part of it, relaxation. So what's the best way, do you think, to create flexible lighting options?
Yeah. First of all, this is another area where I think integrators have an advantage, and there's an opportunity today because, as you mentioned, these homes are now being used for these multiple purposes, and integrators now have these tools in their tool bag they can pull out and solve these problems for real problems that consumers are facing today in today's world right now about these flexible spaces. And I would say the biggest thing there is the ability to add lighting that's Rgbw, that has tunable white, but also has color elements in it as well, that allows me to create from fun and entertainment all the way up to these health benefits that we're talking about in the circadian cycle and being able to have lighting that fits around health and wellness. But in addition to that, as I'm sure David could definitely, as lighting designer, opine way more, is having different levels of lighting control. And what I mean by that is it not just having one fixture in that room that allows one level of light, but having a combination of in ceiling, on wall, lamps, having a combination of those things allow me to have different levels of light, layers of light that allow me to then be able to really customize what that lighting looks like throughout the day, but also based on the purpose of that space at that moment. If I need it to be a space for education, I can get it to be really bright in there because that's important for that, but I can also have it be the right color of light to, once again, keep people alert. But if I want an entertainment space, I can make areas of the room different colors while still having some direct light that's in a white spectrum that allows me to really create these fun environments for the consumer. And those different levels, in my mind, are the way that you create that flexible space through lighting.
Right. Sean, as we're talking about all these new capabilities that we're adding to these homes and the impact on the lighting control system, I mean, talk about feature creep in delivering a solution. Ultimately, I guess it really comes down to, what do you believe is the best way to manage client expectations regarding the control of circadian biophilic lighting in the home before, during, and after the installation?
It's kind of a long road for us, right? I equate it a little bit to the introduction of HDTV. So when HDTV was new, as integrators, we thought it was the most amazing thing ever, but it was still a mystery to most of our customers. We introduced that technology. We had pain points. So we had different resolutions to deal with, different screen aspect ratios to deal with, different video products to deal with. What the consumer wanted was a clear picture, right? It was on the integrator's part to make it exactly what the expectation was supposed to be. We're still there. The only good news is that we likely won't be replacing hardware as often as we did with HGTV. We'll likely just be tweaking things. And to that end, what I think the best use of our time as integrators moving forward is to become educators. We have social media presence, we have website presence, we have newsletters, we have salespeople. We communicate with our customers and our trade partners all the time. If we use those platforms to explain not just the benefits of technology, but the uses of those technologies and how we can make them better in those homes, we can constantly engage with those customers. We can make them customers for life by constantly improving the performance of the products we installed in their home months or even years ago, and making sure that we follow up and follow through on those promises of these technologies. Because I can assure you that we've just scratched the surface as integrators of what we can do with these products and these technologies. And we owe it to ourselves and to our customers to keep in contact and let them know what we can do.
As a practical, I think many people that are tuned in understand the fact that these new technologies, these new light fixture capabilities aren't free. They're at a premium of what people are used to. And for those that are in the integration channel that are trying to promote specification grade fixtures from contractor grade stuff, I mean, we've been connecting sophisticated, expensive lighting control systems to contractor grade stuff for a long time. And so one of the opportunities here is educating people with better fixtures. But there's going to be times when perhaps we have to mix the high performance stuff with the, still great stuff, but maybe doesn't have full color saturation and so on and so forth. So David, what are the upsides and downsides of mixing and matching fixtures?
Well, that's a good question. And the upside, I think, is that I don't feel that we can do a great lighting design without mixing fixtures. If you do a space and it's got one fixture type in it, then it's a garage. If you've got multiple layers of light in a space, chances are you're talking about indirect cove light, you're talking about step lights, you have recessed downlights, you have some sort of art light. There are all kinds of different layers in there. And so far, I've never seen a single manufacturer be able to deliver all of those to where you just push a button and everything matches. So I don't know that it's necessarily an upside to mixing and matching fixtures, because it's a pain in the neck, right? If you went from just having to turn on and off the fixtures and specify a color temperature, or a fixed color temperature, now you've got all these color options, and one manufacturer says, here's our cycle, and the other manufacturer says, here's our RGB. And how do you make those two go together? How do you say, well, what with this manufacturer is going to match this manufacturer's 2700K? It's not going to match just out of the gate. And
Right.
So I think it's a real pain in the neck, or it's at least a sharp learning curve. 10 years ago, nobody I knew had a color meter, because we didn't, a color of light meter, because it didn't really matter. We had white and that was it. Now we have all kinds of white, and suddenly it's like, well, we need to test that to see. So let's go into the room. Let's turn all the lights off. Let's turn on this manufacturer. Let's find our 2700K touch point, and then let's turn that off and turn on the next manufacturer and find their 2700K point, because it may be a little different. And then the integrator has to program it. So, cycling, it just made me think of earlier in the talk. This is why we need integrators, because this is not easy stuff, or at least it's not push and walk away. It takes programming, and it takes more intelligence than that, and I think that's why it's here.
Okay, I wanted to do a little deeper dive on the topic of where technology is heading in the lighting control world. I mean, most of the color control, for the most part, it's evolving, is DMX, and DMX is a theatrical kind of standard, and that's where most of that was developed and most of it is applied. So David, you have a theater background in design and in education. Why might we look at theaters and live entertainment to see the future of controls?
Tom, I think theater has had to constantly innovate. And when you do, for example, a big concert, a big live event for a rock star, 10 years later, you better not be doing the same thing when it comes to lighting. Nobody's going to come see it. Right? So it's always getting bigger and better. And because a theater show can be up and down in 3 days, whereas a house or a building is there for 30 years before the systems get changed out, theater is this it's like some sort of bacteria that rapidly, recreates itself, because they have to. It's just part of their industry. And so 30 years ago, they got tired of analog. 100 years ago, they were using dimmers. They were using saltwater dimmers in the opera house in Paris long before we had, a rheostat, right? So they innovate there, and then eventually it makes its way into architecture when we see the benefits of it. So DMX, I was surprised when DMX became a big thing in architectural lighting, because I'd been dealing with it in theater for 20 years at that point. Mm-hmm. So if we look at theater now, DMX was brought in because they didn't want a cable of 300 analog signals. Their cables were literally this big. And they said, we got to come up with a different way to do it. So they came up with DMX. Well, in theater, 512 channels, which is DMX, was a ton of channels in 1990. By 1995, it wasn't. And they had to start adding more and more universes of DMX. Keep going, and then all of a sudden we have to have moving lights. So it's like, okay, now you got a rig at a concert with 600 lights, and one of them is turning green. How do you find that?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you find it right now because the show is live?
Yeah.
So they came up with RDM, right, for remote device management to say, okay, now the light is telling me that it's not behaving. So we have that two-way communication. And now there's just, they just released an Ethernet DMX RDM that's can have multiple control nodes on it, which is not something that theater was used to. But now you get these big stadium shows like, like the halftime show for the Super Bowl. It's like, are you going to run millions of miles of cable for that and have one console doing it all? Or are you going to have 6 control points, and are you going to have wireless technology in it? And it has to be 100% reliable if you're going wireless in theater, and there's only one chance to get it right. So it's like they figure it out, they work it out, and then all of a sudden, the theater manufacturers are like, we just put this chip in our light fixture, and now it talks DMX wirelessly. And somebody says, that chip probably costs $5. We could put that in a light fixture. And then you start to see advances in architecture that way. So there's always kind of a back and forth between the two worlds, but it's a hotbed of innovation.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, really, it seems like, wires have been the bane for a lot of these situations, and wireless appears to be have a lot of advantages from a control standpoint and integration, particularly for retrofit applications and such. So, from your perspective, where is wireless going? Will we always need wires? What do you think of the wireless protocols that are being proposed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and you hit on it. There are some applications where you go in and you look at where you're trying to retrofit product, you can't get a wire there. Now, I've seen integrators get wires where wires don't belong, and they do it every day. But if you don't need to, why pull a wire there? And so to that point, I think wireless has come a long way. You are seeing even in DMX, you've got some, and David just referred to it just a second ago, you've got some Wi-Fi based DMX systems that are out there today and capability to control those. But I'm confident that we'll continue to see that evolve even on the DMX side. But even outside of that, if you even go outside of DMX, we're seeing a lot of sophisticated lighting control that can be done over Zigbee, that can be done over Bluetooth, SIG mesh. Because as long as I can control that device and I can get feedback from it to tell it, I want you to be this color of blue and I want you to be at this Kelvin, and it verifies it back to me, I've got everything I need to know to be able to program or to be able to enhance or change or do whatever I need to from that lighting perspective. And so that's where you start to bring in Thread and Zigbee and all these others that are out there. And that's going to continue to, we've seen that happen at the low end in the IoT space for sure. That and as David was mentioning, that's happened on the DMX where they're pulling things in there. The same thing's happening with the technologies that have happened at that lower end as we start to bring those into some of the higher end solutions. And that they're pretty robust today. There's a good amount of research that's done there and stability on lots and lots of implementations.
Sean, from the integrator standpoint, and your interactivity with your many offices across the country, what's your take on where wireless fits and where it's going? I mean, I know as an integrator, if I can get the wire there, I want to get the wire there because I want to guarantee it's working. But at the same time, I have wireless solutions in my home that work really solidly. But what's your take on that?
You just made a really good point, Tom. So in a retrofit application, wireless is a savior for us, right? So clients have any expectations of a wired solution because there were never any wires run. So that wireless solution is a great option. The difficulty comes in when we're looking at a new design, a new construction project, where their expectations are we're going to install the latest and the greatest, and these systems depend on wireless communication. But what happens when we want to change those fixtures out 5, 10, or 15 years down the road? When the client says, what about the new technology that we don't know about yet? What's coming down the pipe that we're going to want in several years? And if we're not wired for that, what are we going to tear my house apart to put these wires in for those devices? Is wireless going to get better? So there's no perfect solution, but we have a couple of things we try and abide by. We offer our clients the option of wiring a house just like you'd wire a traditional panelized lighting system in the old days with a Lutron or a Crestron or a Vantage lighting control system, where those wires terminate into a panel, but they can be spliced through or connected through and powered 100% of the time, which is what these wireless fixtures demand, and can be a wireless solution installed with the option of adding or changing wiring down the road. The other thing we do is recommend over-wiring for wireless repeaters. I know wiring for wireless is funny, right? But having enough locations for repeaters that if we find a fixture or two that's being finicky and outside the range of the repeater that we thought was going to cover it, we have some extra cabling in the house to allow for another wireless repeater to extend the range of that wireless system. And if that client decides to build an addition on the home, maybe we use those extra wires to expand the range and the scope of the house that we're working on.
Yeah. You just touched on something that needs to be a whole nother panel discussion 5 and 10 years from now when we need to service and replace any of this LED lighting fixtures that we're putting in. That's for another day. And you touched on really kind of what my last question was, but maybe there's a few things that you can elaborate on. This is lighting, as I've experienced it over the last decade. I've been deep into the fixture side of integrating it with controls. There's a tremendous amount of detail. I know, David, deliverables, good lighting design, there's a lot that goes into it. So, what is the best way to plan and document electrical wiring for wireless fixtures? And is there a process for future proofing? You kind of touched on it, over wiring, but maybe you can expand. Is there a process for future proofing this wiring to allow changes in the future?
Yeah, I think that documentation is key. So we've had some situations where we've scared both electrical contractors and electrical inspectors with the specifications we've come up with because it's non-traditional. We had an electrician ask if he can put switches, rocker switches by the electrical panel for all the various wireless lighting loads in the house. And we said, no, what if the client turns those switches off, none of the lights will work. So there's an educational part that has to take place. And that's an important part of the documentation that we all generate. Everyone has their own methods and processes, but indicating that these are wireless controlled fixtures or wirelessly controlled fixtures with the intelligence and the communication built into the fixture itself goes a long way towards explaining that. I think that's a critical point to express to anyone wiring these homes. We also have to look at other elements that are not necessarily color changing in wireless fixtures. So most chandeliers are not going to be wireless or have wireless control, and they need to be integrated and need to be documented the same way. 0 to 10 volt is a protocol that was, I think, created for fluorescent ballasts initially, but has applications in the LED world. And there's a low voltage communication cable that has to run along with a line voltage cable. And that's the responsibility of the designer and the specifier, and in some cases the integrator, depending on how the controls are being laid out. So we've got to be careful that we're mindful that we understand the technologies. Our wiring diagrams are rock solid, and we might have to explain some things, but as long as they're followed, we're writing the instruction manual for the control of the light and the lighting in the house.
Paul, do you have anything to add to that comment? No, I think a good rule of thumb is and you touched on it and Sean touched on it. If you can get a wire there, get a wire there. I think that's just what we've always done in this channel. But I think the big part that I took out of what Sean said, which I think is a great best in class kind of experience, is that documentation, because something's going to happen at some time in the future. And they may not even be working with Sean in the future. They may decide they're going to go another direction. And that homeowner having access to what's going on in the house to be able to turn over to whoever it is that's taking it over, it's invaluable. And I think it's a great service that you offer your customers to have that kind of level of detail. Yeah. David, any parting words here? I think we've hit up against our line here.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say that on that last topic, first of all, I want Sean's team wiring my house because it sounds like they're on it. But I also want to say that if someone tells you they can future-proof your lighting, that's when you know to buy from someone else. Because I've stood up in front of boards for church projects and whatever, saying where I was pitching a smart lighting system to say, folks, I'm sorry, you have a choice to buy an outdated legacy technology or cutting edge technology that will be outdated tomorrow. Those are the two options, because the cycle is so fast that you can't really future proof. And when it comes to wireless, I would say, how many of us, when we get home, how many of us are plugging our laptops into into the network, and how many of us are using Wi-Fi? We will sacrifice quality and speed for convenience. Yeah. And I think ultimately that's probably why wireless, even though I'd rather have everything wired, I think wireless is probably going to be where most things move, because, hey, we already do it with our phones. I mean, the quality of this does not match the technology from 50 years ago most of the time. But hey, I can carry it anywhere I want. So that we give up for that convenience.
That's a great point. Well, this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate our panelists' insight. Clearly, this is something that we could talk about for hours, but we have some really great questions here. So we are now going to move into the Q&A portion of the session.
In Switzerland, and they've done a lot of really good study, and even during this pandemic, have done a bunch of research and have a lot of documentation showing these effects of living in your home more, the different changes that people are going through with being at home and even stuck at home in a lot of cases. And so there's really good documentation out there that will help educate you about what the benefits of light are for human health and once again, the biology around it and the science that's there. So that's where I would start. And that's going to lead you on the journey. There's lots of data out there. So.
Right. The other, as I've learned about this subject over time, we'll be doing this virtually for a while. And some of the things I've attended in the past are a conference called Leducation, L-E-D-Education, and of course Light Fair. And if you really kind of scan through their program, you can really look for, this particular subject. So it's really good to do that and then identify who are those subject matter experts. And often, they're happy to continue to talk about this subject. A lot of people are very passionate about this. Moving on here, David, Brian asked, could you address your thoughts about approaching medical clinics who specialize in sleep to introduce our tech to their clients and for their own office spaces? Has anybody been doing this smartly? Examples, case studies? I know you were involved in this pretty early on, and you have some direct experience. So, what are your thoughts?
That's a great question, and I'm going to have to do some more research on it, because these sleep centers, I haven't heard much about them integrating the technology in here, and I can come up with at least one reason why. Most of the studies that I've read have been with, you can read about, say, light for aging in place, light for retirement facilities, light for aging, Alzheimer's facilities, etc. That's where most of the research studies that I've seen have come from. And also, one of the earlier ones was in the NICU, so the neonatal intensive care unit. So for babies who are forced to stay in the hospital, they used to just leave the lights on in the NICU all the time so people could see the babies. And now they're starting to put these systems into those areas. But when it comes to sleep centers, I think they're not involved in the sleep center primarily because the light that we take in doesn't affect our sleep tonight. It primarily affects our sleep 24 hours from now. So our circadian cycle is on a delay. So if it went in, it may impact your sleep, but the biggest impact is going to be a day late. So you'd have to stay in the sleep center for a couple of days to be able to see the effects of that. But I love the thought of reaching potential customers that way. So if we can find a good case study, I think you're onto something. Maybe we need to fund one and see if we can get that data so we can go after it. It's a great question.
We'll do a Kickstarter.
Exactly.
So Sean, I've got a question here. I'm really interested in your thoughts on here. So control for Rgbw fixtures. What other control technologies do you see that will be of benefit to the integrator?
So I think of DMX a little bit like I think of RS-232 when we control AV systems. It's been around for a long time. It's tested. It's tried and true. It's still a very, very reliable and widely used technology. The other side of this is that a lot of the intelligence is being built into the fixtures and the lamps themselves now. So that opens up the door for other wireless protocols to control these devices. So I think what we're going to see is a combination of DMX controls for fixtures that are not controlled at the fixture, but controlled, say, at the switch location or at a driver location. And we'll see newer fixtures and newer products coming with built-in control that's communicated via wireless, whether it be Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or a Z-Wave or ZV type protocol. So we're going to see a combination of those technologies. So we as integrators have to be prepared to use them all, and probably multiple protocols on the same system in order to control the devices that we install.
Right. Yeah. The best thing about standards is the more standards, the better. Yeah. Anyway, it's an old joke there. So, I'd like probably everybody to weigh in on this. This is from Anonymous, and as technology is continually advancing, what strategies are companies utilizing to allow for their customers to easily upgrade their systems and not get stuck with a dated system? I mean, who wants to jump in on that? I mean, David, you kind of said, hey, you can have old technology or you can have new technology that'll be old tomorrow. But, at the same time, what, I guess you say that, but what else might you recommend to try to thwart that as best you can?
Well, let me give you an example, Tom. DMX, when it first came out as a theater protocol 30 years ago, was a 5-pin protocol. So there were 5 pins, there were 5 wires in it, and they wanted to future-proof their system. So there was a plus and a minus and a ground, and then 2 spares. They had no idea what those wires were going to be. They just knew they might need them someday. Well, the truth is, we pulled millions of miles of 5-pin cable and never used them because Ethernet completely replaced it. So when you look into the future, I do think it's impossible to predict. I think it is very likely that you will need electricity at the fixture point and that everything else can be done wirelessly. So in some ways, it's going to get easier and easier and easier to upgrade technology as we move more and more and more wireless. Right now I'd say run, 12.3 to every fixture and run Cat5 to every fixture and run, a bundle of low voltage, and then you'll be good for the next few years, but probably most of those wires you'll never use.
So, Sean, you're an integrator, and you're dealing with this, really frequently. Do you have any different thoughts there at all? Or?
No, actually, I would echo what David said. I think that we have opportunities as integrators to have that discussion with the client. But ultimately, what he's saying is true. We're moving to a wireless protocol, and future-proofing isn't necessarily a thing. They call them fixtures for a reason. They're fixed, right? So we put them in the ceiling, we drywall around them, we mud up right to the edges of the trimless fixtures. They're not easy to replace. I mean, sometimes you can replace the LED elements inside or the drivers inside from below, but you're not going to replace the fixture. So the control protocol you use when you install a fixture will likely be the one that's there for the life of that fixture until you do a significant renovation, at which time we have an opportunity to run wire if we need to, or establish new lighting or wireless protocol if need be.
So, Paul, kind of staying along with this DMX conversation, Daryl is asking, DMX versus Dolly. Would you have any thoughts, or do we see, one eclipsing the other, or are they just going to be just an addition? We got to know 485, 232, IP protocol, on and on and on. So, what are your thoughts on DMX versus Dolly?
Yeah, we certainly see DMX used a lot more in this color control field, for sure. Dolly, we see that to some degree. You see it a lot more in Europe, is where we see a lot more of the Dolly being used. And I would say
it is another flavor of control, another flavor of how things are working. But I would say what we see the most of is really in color control is DMX. Is more so more popular, certainly more solutions and options out there for fixtures, control, capability integration. It's much more established, but are there some advantages to Dolly? If it, you're exactly right. The manufacturers, most manufacturers will have a DMX interface before they'll have the other, and more people are familiar here in the U.S. with DMX protocol. But do I misunderstand with Dolly? It's a lot harder to miss wire. It's a little easier to troubleshoot out there in the field, easier to, or is that a misconception? Sean, you're out there dealing with it. Do you have any experience, or David?
I can't say we work with Dolly very often, frankly. As I've seen it, it's been largely like Paul mentioned, a European protocol. So DMX is what we're running into on most of the products we integrate.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Let's see here. Suzanne is asking David, as a non-lighting designer, what certifications classes would you recommend to further educate ourselves on lighting design and the future of lighting as we incorporate lighting into our portfolio of services?
That's a good question. Of course, I'm on the team that just created the lighting technology certification program for ProSource, one of the buying groups, and I have to recommend that one. But there's a ton of great opportunities to learn about lighting. HTSA has some education offerings that Tom, you've been instrumental in. The Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy offers a great short course. The ALA, American Lighting Association, offers a series of courses at different levels that you can take both remotely and on your own time. And then I would look at the Illuminating Engineering Society and the International Association of Lighting Designers. Both of those have education offerings as well. Be sure to check out what it is that you're going to learn in each, because there's so much about lighting you can learn that you could spend the next 10 years learning about lighting and still miss the things that you need to know in the integration channel. So you want to be a little bit choosy as to what you take and what you pick just for your own time. But you'll learn something in all of those options and in all of those places.
Well, listen, this is towards the end of our panel, this being the first Tech Talk. Thanks for tuning in here. I'd like to thank Paul Williams from GE Savant, Sean Weiner from Bravas, as well as David Warfel from Light Can Help You. So thank you for tuning in. This has been recorded. Put it on your playlist, and